Welcome to Confronting Injustice, stories designed to inform, educate, and challenge our opinions and values. I am Linda Solomon, the host. I am a former educator, recently retired, social justice advocate, restorative justice coach. And today our guest is James Watson. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm James Watson. 63 years old, and I've been wrongly convicted of a crime I did not commit.
Thank you. Well, certainly your story, your experience is no doubt an injustice, a travesty of justice. It is also a story of hope and resilience. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? How did I
end up in the justice system?
Yes.
It's from where I was one day in November 1979. I was approached in my apartment by the detectives of the Rosendale section of Boston relating to a homicide that occurred outside my building. And I was therefore questioned on a number of occasions pertaining to that incident, and finally arrested and charged for the crime.
Okay.
And I have talked to the detectives over and over again to, to really look into what you're doing, because you have the wrong man. Mm-hmm. I was nowhere outside this apartment at 4 a.m.
And can you tell us how old were you when that happened?
I was 20 years old.
20.
I just had my 20th birthday, April 3rd.
Okay.
And after that, it was downhill, and I was formally charged in November of 1979 of murder and sent to the county jail.
Okay. Interesting. Can you tell us, so you said that the police came to your door, knocked on the door, and they questioned you?
Repeatedly.
Okay. You shared an incident where you were in the police station and something happened. Can you tell us about the...
Yes, the police officers that arrested me, ethics were misguided because they seemed to be biased, racially biased. Mm-hmm. Back in 1979, the tension was high at that time. And they were so angry at the crime that was committed that they didn't really care for justice. So they actually wanted me to reach for a gun and try to make an escape or something of that nature, because they placed a gun by my chair in a garbage pail and wanted me to reach for it.
Okay, and hope that you would, okay.
Yes, right. With my family outside the door, waiting for my release.
Okay. Can you, so you were convicted of murder?
Yes.
And sentenced to?
My natural life, but I was arraigned on murder.
Okay.
When they arraigned me on the murder charge, the district attorney asked for the death penalty due to the nature of the crime and the underlying felony, which was in the course of an armed robbery.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Can you tell us a little about, so you were convicted of this crime and you claimed your innocence all along?
Correct.
What happened? What do you think happened that resulted in you receiving the death penalty in a natural life sentence? What went wrong? Like, how did that happen?
Is that they refused to look at justice as it's supposed to be presented. The DA represented the Commonwealth, and he represented them unethically.
And can you, help us understand what you mean by the DA represented the system unethically?
Well, they took evidence, which they had knowledge that we didn't fit the prescription of the individuals. that committed the crime. But that didn't matter. They put that under the rug and could proceed with the investigation on who they had in custody.
Okay. So, am I hearing you correctly that, so the DA received information that indicated that it was not you, it was someone else?
Yes.
And they chose to
received the information knowing that it was not the individuals they had in custody.
Okay.
They arrested me, and they arrested a kid, a 16-year-old youth.
Okay. What, can you talk about the impact that arrest, death penalty had on your family? Or actually had on you? How did you?
It was devastating to me, but but I've been sitting in county for about almost 2 years, so I just got numb to it because I'm thinking in my own head that down the road they're gonna say, I think we better check into this. I think we made a mistake, but that seemed not to be happening. So they continued the course to proceed with trial.
Okay.
And my family was devastated. They didn't know what to do.
Okay. I heard you say that you were hoping at some point that they would recognize that they made a mistake.
Yes, correct.
And you're out, so obviously at some point they did recognize. Can you tell us, and this is fast forward, it's a 30-minute show, so we're trying to get in as much as we can, and perhaps this will be a two-part conversation. How did you're exonerated now, which means you were found, can you tell us about, what does that mean, exonerated, for those of us, the audience who may not know?
To be clear of all charges. That means that you should have never been arrested, tried, and convicted for this crime.
And how did you go from being on death row to being exonerated? How did that happen?
It happened through the Innocent Project, which went to a few lawyers. I had about 3 lawyers, and the 3rd lawyer was the Innocent Project.
So you had 3 lawyers. Does that mean you had 3 different trials?
No, I had 2 trials, but I had 2 trials of the same lawyer at the beginning of the proceedings, and after the 2nd trial, I had no lawyer.
In both trials, you were found guilty and sentenced to the death penalty?
No, the first trial, I was found guilty and sentenced, but it was deemed unconstitutional, cruel and unusual punishment.
Okay.
So that was taken off the table for me, and they abolished it, which saved my neck.
From the death, being put to death?
If they would have passed it, I don't think I'd be here talking to you today.
Interesting. Can you tell us, how did you become involved with the Innocent Project? Can you tell us a little bit about the Innocent Project?
Yes, I've heard it as it was being developed, 2012. But I was kind of reluctant to get involved with that because of the bad experience I had with my first lawyer. So I was reluctant to even indulge in another lawyer and decided to try it myself.
Okay.
But, with conversations with other cons that were inside the joint with me, kind of convinced me to give it a shot. Since I did started doing all the research and looking for loopholes and showed that I was innocent of this charge, then I agreed. They came aboard and they brought me in.
And they came aboard after you'd been in jail for almost 40 years?
Yes.
Okay. And, how did they get your case? Like, did you reach out to them?
Yes, I reached out to them. I sent they sent me an application, I filled it out, gave them the details, the status of the case, what I had in my possession, and how it went about. And they reviewed it, and they reached out to me. Okay.
In my research, I discovered that oftentimes individuals who are exonerated because of what is a misjustice of carriage, the DA's, someone
dropped the ball,
or deliberately withheld information or distorted information. Can you?
Extorted, dropped the ball, all apply.
So is that what happened in your case?
Yes.
Can you tell us specifically what information did they find that cleared you and allowed you to get out?
Clear to me, the district attorney had an individual hypnotized, and he had been hypnotized before he made the identification. He was hypnotized, actually, after he was hypnotized, he made identification,
Okay.
which is, by rules and regulations, he's supposed to identify the individual before any kind of drug or anything is endorsed into his mind.
Okay.
And he didn't do that, and he withheld it from us.
And my understanding from, examining your case is that information, you stated information was withheld.
Yes, crucial
that could
information.
have cleared you
long time
40
ago.
plus years ago.
Yes.
All right. All right. Another interesting thing, well, I have a few questions, but one I'm interested, you had one child, you had an infant when you went away,
Yes.
right? So can you just speak a moment about what that was like being incarcerated for all of his childhood up until his adult life? How old was he when you went to jail?
He was 13 months.
And how old was he when you were released?
He was 41.
Okay.
He was 41 when I was released.
Interesting. Okay. I have a bunch of questions about that, but for the sake of time, I will come back. Maybe perhaps we can have him on the show with you another time. Something else that I read that was interesting is the victim who was murdered, who you were accused of murdering, his family supported your release. Can you speak about the family members of the person who was murdered and how they supported you?
Yes, they supported me because after they reviewed the evidence themselves and documentation of the case, it showed clearly that the detectives, the district attorney, fabricated.
They fabricated information.
Fabricated information, and they reached out to the family with fabrication information.
Okay.
By informing them that we got the guy who committed this crime, but they all the time they was actually lying to them.
Okay. And so they realized that and came to your aid?
Yes. After reviewing all the information that my attorneys had, spoke with them, they read it for themselves, and they agreed that they did not believe that I was the person that murdered their loved one.
All right. And so there was a double injustice here then, because you, along with your co-defendant, were charged and found guilty, and you sentenced to death for a crime you didn't commit, and then the family members of the victim never received justice either because their focus was on you, and the murderer was free to roam the street.
Yes, to this very day, they are free to roam the streets. They have never been brought to justice.
Okay.
His case becomes now a cold case.
So you spent 41 years in jail, a lot of time in jail. You met a lot of people, I'm sure. What percentage of people in jail, based just on your experience, do you think have been wrongly convicted in jail?
Over the decades that I spent in, I say it on a scale of 1 to 10, I say 8.
Okay.
And it's growing.
All right. And we, okay. What would you say to people who are hearing about your situation for the first time, or hearing about the Innocent Project for the first time?
What I say to them is those who are incarcerated and that are fighting to prove their innocence, to continue to fight. Do not give up. There's people out here, there's organizations out here that are willing to help and assist. But we can't help and assist if you do not reach out and let us know who you are and where you're at.
Well, that makes me think, before you answer the second part to that question about what would you say to people who have never heard about the exoneree process.
People who have never heard about exoneree process is to reach out. It's out there now. There's guys now that are coming out left and right from the penitentiaries all over.
Okay.
You know, not just Mass. You know what I mean? Colorado, Texas, California.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? The numbers are growing.
Mm-hmm. So the question I was going to ask you is, at what point, was there at any point that you gave up hope that you would ever get out? Did you?
Sure, I did. Sure,
Can
I
you
did.
speak to that?
I gave up hope quite a few times, but I never stopped fighting. No.
Why do you think that is? After 41 years, or after 20, after 10, in a system that clearly wronged you in this instance, how could you maintain hope?
Family, friends, you know what I mean, associates inside the penitentiary.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because everybody's not in there for something. You know, so they came around and encouraged me, you know, to keep, you know what I mean, just keep doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? Because they call me Slim, the joint. Keep doing what you're doing, Slim. So I made the law library my second home.
Okay. Interesting.
And I just decided I'm gonna fight until I can't fight no more.
Okay. Can you speak to the relationship you had with your son and the promise you made your son?
Well, my son, I made a promise to him, even though I was not sure, you know, that it would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean by that is my release from prison, or me succeeding in proving my innocence. But we made a promise to each other. You stay out of prison, keep your record clean, do the right thing, I'll come out of prison. And that was only a dream.
Interesting. So you were able to realize that dream?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful, great. And then back to the other question I asked you is, what would you say to people who are unfamiliar with this process? What would your ask be of them, or what do you want to say to people who think, oh, that's just an isolated incident, that doesn't happen all the time, that's...
What I would say to them, don't wait till it happens to you or yours. You know, what happened to me can happen to them. What happened to me can happen again.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they got these people out there that are bad cops, bad DAs, you know what I mean, it can happen again. Okay. I can leave out this room and be pointed out and accused of something.
Okay. So 41 years in jail, 20, so you went in when you were 20, you spent 40 plus years in jail, you missed your sons, you were not afforded the opportunity to raise your son, protect him, be a parent, because you were wrongly accused of something.
Correct.
And incarcerated.
Yes.
How do you don't seem to be angry. Like, how do you make sense?
I was angry at one time. Angry, bitter, hated everything about law enforcement. Mm-hmm. You know, the justice system. And then I've realized all they do is eat me up inside. You know what I mean? Slowing me down from functioning. You know what I mean? And keeping my thoughts on track. So I let it go.
Okay.
I adapted to my situation, which wasn't easy.
I'm sure it wasn't. I want to put a plug in for the Innocent Project, because I know that over the years, a number of men and women have been exonerated.
Yes.
And so can you just, and I know you mentioned it before, but just what plug would you put in for the New England Innocent Project?
Plug I put in is to get involved, notify them. You know what I mean? Notify them. I had excellent professionals working on my case. Barbara Monroe,
Mm-hmm.
Maddie Mathis, John Nazi, Jill, I just can't remember her last name right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had numerous people, Molly.
So it sounds like you had a team of people working.
I had a great team. To this very day, I have a great team.
How did you pay for that? Did you have, how could you?
I didn't pay for it. I had no money to pay for no lawyers. Because I was going to represent myself because I had no funds for that. Okay. It's too expensive.
So they're doing this work because it's the right thing to do, because
yes. Yes.
Okay.
They're spending millions and billions of dollars to put people in prison. Instead of turning around and spending millions and billions of dollars to turn around and correct the problem of the system.
Okay.
To lower the rate of people being incarcerated.
Interesting. Okay. If you were to ask of people, what would that ask be again? To get involved?
Support the Innocent Project.
Okay.
Support the Innocent Project.
All right.
Again, support them.
All right. And you know, for people who might not, you know, who are hearing about this exoneree process, I'm just concerned that I think about the people who have been wrongfully convicted, who are still in jail now. I'm concerned about, like, it sounds like you were lucky that they connected with you.
Yes. Some people that are no longer in prison, you know, that are innocent, because at the very end, they lose hope. You know, hope is there, you know, mm-hmm. But they end up taking their life. Okay. Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the costs, some of the costs you had to pay by being incarcerated for all this time? I know you lost your mom while you were incarcerated. I lost
my brother, and I lost my sister, my grandmother, my uncle, my cousins, a lot of my friends.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You can't get that back.
Did you ever get an apology? Like, you were released, did you ever get an apology, or did anyone acknowledge?
Yeah. Well, Rachel Rollins, she apologized. But she wasn't in office at the time this transaction happened. She wasn't in office.
Okay.
This was after the fact. But she was there and she agreed that justice wasn't served.
Okay.
She read the documentations, and she went with the judge, and they agreed. And she agreed to turn around there and have my case no pause.
Okay. Well, you know, I was moved by your story. I continue to be moved by it, and we just thank you for sharing your story, and we just wish you the very best. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to have you and your son here on the show, because you were convicted and sentenced, but your son was as well, because he missed the opportunity to have a father, a protector.
My entire family was sentenced.
Yep. So thank you again for joining us, and we wish you the very, very best moving forward. Thank you.